awful lot of things being spoken about GDPR at the moment, and I think it's fair to say that the jury is still out in terms of how it will affect an awful lot of businesses and the size of the businesses. But one thing that is for certain is it is coming into law, and as such there are penalties for not being compliant and certainly trying to be compliant. So it is important that businesses move to that. If we look at a warehousing situation, then it's very, very easy to see that warehousing, perhaps on an individual pick and place type order, are dealing with direct customers and consumers' personal information. That personal information could contain such things as their name, their address, their telephone number, even their credit card information on the PCI compliance side. Warehouse operatives are now really handling sensitive consumer information, and as such GDPR compliance is a vital part of that now. By the same measure, the company also has that responsibility for making sure that they handle their customers' data responsibly, and that equally applies to the employment information of that particular employee that's operating at that particular place in that particular time within that warehouse. In order that no data is compromised is a very, very difficult guarantee to be able to give. Nobody knows how many hackers and cyber attacks, state-sponsored attacks are really out there, except it's an awful lot. So at some point it is inevitable that some form of compromise to the data is likely to take place. I guess the real challenge then is to keep that to an absolute minimum, and there are ways that can be done in terms of how we restrict that, and that's by the levels of security that we can implement into a wired network, a wireless network, into the actual application security, physical perimeters on things, and a well-educated user is also very important in making sure that there's no obvious easy way in for intruders to get into a network. There is a huge amount of data in any warehouse type situation, and that data in itself, it is the information that contains that is valuable. If it's valuable to us as a business or as a process, then it's also valuable to perhaps the unscrupulous in terms of trying to own it. So it's important that we protect that data and that we manage that data as best as we can, in the same way that we'd manage and try and protect our own personal assets. So if we're entrusting our personal assets and data to somebody else, then it's important that they manage that correctly and look after it in a manner in which that we would want it looking after ourselves. Different levels of device and security, in a similar way to perhaps different levels of security perhaps on your own property, going down from a simple lock on your front door to RF detection movements and house alarms. All of these types of things can be replicated in a data environment in terms of what levels of security we introduce into that data. But it is important that we manage the entire process and the entire data journey all the way through the process to make sure that we remain compliant to GDPR regs. Some of the consequences that companies can face for losing some of that data can be quite significant. The average data breach, they estimate at the moment, conducted by independent analysis, that they are costing around about £2.5 million as a compliance breach or data integrity loss, which works out at around about £200 per record. So it is quite significant, and therefore it's worth that extra cost of making sure that you've got your compliance process and you've got the relevant levels of security at each particular process or data collection point. So GDPR compliance is a very relevant thing that is slowly becoming into every organisation as everybody strives to get to be compliant by May of this year.